everyone, welcome to Joleedo Thrones, the premier Game of Thrones podcast on the Joleedo Podcast Network, where we cover topics ranging from progressive politics to superheroes. If you like the show, please follow us on Twitter at Joleedo, on Tumblr at joleedo.tumblr.com, or like us on Facebook. If you're listening on iTunes, Spreaker, SoundCloud, or any of the other great podcast apps, we'd love for you to subscribe and recommend the show. Your support keeps us alive. I'm your host, Alex Lee, and here with me today is Jason Johnson. How you doing, Jason?
Pretty good, Alex.
So, Game of Thrones, Season 6, Episode 2, what'd you think?
The big one. It was the big one. After last week, which I honestly thought was pretty disappointing.
Well, I thought that last episode was pretty good. I mean, not quite as good as the end of Season 5, but a significantly stronger start to the season than the previous season.
Yeah, it's not that I didn't like it. It's just I'm sick of character. Oh, I am sick of Dany being left out in the desert for a season. You know what I mean? Like, how many years do I have to watch her wander through another desert before she does what she's supposed to do? And I understand that her eventually getting, to Westeros and, the battle for the Iron Throne, or however that's going to play out with her. I understand they want to keep that. They want to keep that one for the big finale. That's the last season. I get that, but
that makes sense. But I would say that you could point to tonight's episode as being a big episode, but we don't even see Dany at all.
No, that's true. We didn't see the Sand Sisters either.
Yeah,
one of these is not like the other. I actually like Dany. Little on the fence about the Sand Sisters, but actually that entire Dorne arc, but that has nothing to do with tonight's episode.
Yeah, absolutely. We're all across the map here. We start off not even in the same time period as the last episode.
So what did you think about that, about incorporating flashbacks in that way? Because last season, in episode 1 of season 5, we get a Cersei flashback.
Yep.
Where she encounters the witch or whoever that is. And we get the details of this curse that, she'll have 3 children, they're going to die.
So I heard someone at the Game of Thrones premiere viewing party I went to that their hot take was that witch who gave that premonition to Cersei is in fact Melisandre. And I don't buy that, but that would be interesting. Maybe that's what maybe the TV show goes somewhere different with it.
Yeah, it could be. It's an interesting idea, but nothing. I mean, we haven't seen anything else to support that.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's interesting. So compared to how they told that flashback last season, where it's a cold open, like we're in the past,
yeah, versus
having Bran like being an observer.
Yeah, I think the perspective of Bran being the observer really adds more to it, and it's not just kind of it doesn't really have a lot of basis. I think it really invests the viewer and the audience more in the scene, and yeah, I really liked it.
I do too, and it makes me very anxious for what's the next one. What's the next one we're going to see?
Yeah,
like, how far? What other events are we going to go back and see? Like the Kingslayer in action? Are we going to see the Mad King die? Are we going to see like the end of Robert's rebellion?
Are we going to see the Tower?
Oh, I think now it's more obvious than ever. That's happening. And I think bringing Lyanna back into the show, who she's been referenced several times, in the pilot of the series, she was referenced, and then Littlefinger and Sansa talk briefly about her in season 5. But now we get to see her. We get to see, who Rhaegar Targaryen was fighting for, in a way.
Yep. Who he was willing to throw it all away for.
That kind of leads me in a roundabout way to something else important that happened, and that was the return of the Greyjoys.
Yeah.
And the death of Balon Greyjoy.
A scene that's described in the, just kind of described off scene in the books, if I recall correctly. Mm-hmm. And then here, it's right in your face, very intense, very stormy. I enjoyed it. I like the return of the Greyjoys. I'm excited to see more. What did you think?
I did too. I didn't realize that I missed them.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But one thing that really stuck in my mind is that if you think back to I believe it was season 2, when Melisandre takes Gendry's blood, and she and Stannis curse the 3 usurpers to the throne: Joffrey, Robb, and Baelon. Mm-hmm. And we saw Robb die at the end of season 3, and then episode 2 of season 4, Joffrey gets it.
Yeah.
And I've been kind of waiting, since we haven't been with the Greyjoys for a while. I've been waiting to see, the death of Baelon, because in a way, that is, for lack of a better term, like the fulfilled promise of the Lord of Light. It was like the last part of that curse, the last big spell of Melisandre's and Stannis' that had to be fulfilled in order to get to the end of this episode.
That makes sense.
If that makes sense. Like there are some things that need to happen first.
Okay.
Before anyone can be brought back to life.
Have to finish their other spells first. Now, what's the name of that particular Greyjoy? I believe I recall his title, but do you know it?
Is it Aaron? Is it Euron? However you pronounce that.
EU.
Is that who that is?
Is it like the gray eye, or he's got?
I don't know. I don't remember.
We got a brief taste of the other uncle, the priest.
Yeah.
And I didn't really care for that, because that was so it was interesting to me that the King's Moot was law, not a long lost tradition.
Mm-hmm.
And so as though they had always been done that. And if I recall correctly, the Greyjoys had essentially taken power by force, and that had been the law of the land for the rememberable past.
Right.
And so, yeah, interesting change. I mean, I'm pro King's Moots. They seem like they're a good time.
Yeah, that should be interesting, especially with a character like Yara, who her name was Asha.
Yeah,
Asha in the books. Do you know why they changed that?
I have no idea. Yeah, I in my notes written down here, I have Asha.
When you read Asha, you don't get it confused with another character's name, Osha, the wildling.
Oh.
But when it's spoken aloud, it seems, or at least the idea was that it might be too confusing to audiences who aren't familiar with the novels to hear Osha and Asha.
I understand that.
Now, I don't know, Yara and Arya sound pretty similar to me.
Arya.
But I guess they weren't too concerned with that.
One thing I thought was interesting, so in the funeral for Balon Greyjoy, we had a dirge playing, and throughout a lot of the scenes, there was no sound. I mean, no music being played. One in particular interest, I'm going to jump over to Essos, is Tyrion going and chatting with the dragons. And I heard that. I loved it. This is one of my favorite scenes, and I thought that they did a great job with that. And Tyrion, drunk as a skunk, going down and talking to these dragons, and it's just total silence. And at first, I was wondering, could they play with the suspense a bit here and kind of turn that up? But just the total nothingness, except for the slithering of leather and the clinking of chains and the stumbling of a shit-faced dwarf.
I absolutely love the scene. One of the things I love about the Game of Thrones dragon design is how honestly kind of terrifying and vicious they are. We see dragons in all kinds of media, but there's something about these, and maybe it's how toothy they are, or how sinister they were designed.
Yeah,
they always make I'm always a little unnerved watching them. They're so tense. Those scenes are so tense with them. You're really not sure what they're going to do. And it's not that I feared for Tyrion's life in that moment, because I think he's got some thick plot armor.
Yep.
But man, talk about me making me feel nervous for a plot armored character that something could actually happen to him. Yeah. And that moment did it to me. I didn't know how it was going to play out. And that surprise alone, I think, makes it not only a strong scene for this episode, but in a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really agree. And I think it does a lot for Tyrion's character, because it really reinforces the baseline level of intelligence he has. I mean, despite his demeanor and despite his like buffoonery, I mean, we saw it when he ran the city in King's Landing. But he's very smart. He's very well read, and he put his knowledge to use. He knows dragons are intelligent, and he trusted his learning, and he went for it.
Yeah, I loved it. I thought it was great, and I love his line leading up to that moment where he goes, that's, to paraphrase, that's what I do. I drink and I know things.
Exactly.
And that is just like a perfect summation of his character. So, getting to the big moment, I want to talk briefly about the few, 2 or 3 resurrections in the show that we've seen so far. In season 1, we saw, I don't remember if he was dead, but he was on death's door, and that's Khal Drogo, and how we saw him through some kind of blood magic be brought back to life, but he came back as a shell, a literal husk.
Yes.
But alive nonetheless, right? The witch's loophole for Dany. And then I believe it was in season 3, I forget the guy's name, he was one of the Brotherhood.
Beric Dondarrion, and then there was Thoros of Myr.
There we go. There's a guy who's been brought back multiple times.
Over and over, and specifically by a member of the religion of the Light of Lord of Light, which is Melisandre's religion. And so then is there one? And there's one other that was specifically in this episode as well, with the crazy shit going on with the mountain. The Franken Mountain, or I guess he's referred to as Robert Strong now.
Is he really?
That's someone texted me that. I don't know if it's true. I'm just putting it out there. Robert Strong. I preferred Franken Mountain. That's what I was going to stick with.
Franken Mountain. I like that.
I mean, that blood smear, just the.
Speaking of Franken Mountain or Mountainstein, whatever. Slamming that guy against the wall. What an amazing reintroduction to that character. Like, in case you forgot, the mountain can fuck your shit up.
Yep.
That's what he does. And this guy, Robert Strong, he's not going to play around. And I love, like, the cowering Kingsguard.
Yeah.
When he's just standing, all he has to do is stand there.
He went for his sword.
Okay. That sigh of relief as he leaves with Cersei. He kind of stares him down for an instant and then follows her.
You know what we didn't get closure on? Jaime.
Oh.
Last we saw Jaime, right? He was being surrounded at the High Sept.
Man, talk about a scene of power play between those two.
Yeah, I mean, you take out Jaime, you already have Cersei kind of cowering behind, and Tommen's unable to do anything for fear of his wife. They're taking complete control. I mean, he had the right of it. They are nothing. They are lowly men, and they have the power to undo an empire.
One of the great themes of the show is how, the idea of the Game of Thrones and the different players who are moving pieces. It's not just kings and armies, but there are gods and bankers and witches and priests, and everyone is fine. Season 1 has these great moments between Varys the Spider and Peter Baelish, Littlefinger, where they have this discussion where you almost feel like that this series is really about these two guys moving their pieces. And I think you can examine all kinds of characters in that fashion as well. But, since they're up front, since they are in season 1, and considering how many main characters die in that season, it almost feels like maybe it is their show. Yeah. Maybe this is their story. Especially how big of a part Varys plays in the novels. I don't want to get into spoilers. I don't know if you finished book 5. Well, we'll bypass that one, but kind of like the plan behind the plan.
As you'd say, I got egg on my head or face.
Hey! This is a terrible segue, but
Brucey B got that sharp silver D.
Kind of reminiscent of how he betrayed Robb in a way. Like, it kind of had those vibes. Not quite at a wedding, but in a moment of what's supposed to be kind of like joy. Yeah. And you think of what's going to happen with this union. With the Red Wedding, it was like that. You unite the families, and Robb's